I've been talking about how Tocqueville describes and in many ways celebrates the principles of American uniqueness, of American exceptionalism, from entrepreneurship to innovation, the impact of Christianity, the idea of social equality and equal dignity, and also the idea of doing things voluntarily, turning to the government only as a last resort. But now we want to turn to Tocqueville's warning, because Tocqueville thinks that America faces a great danger, and it's a danger that I think is now upon us. It's the danger of what Tocqueville calls soft despotism. Soft despotism. It's remarkable that in 1831, Tocqueville could see so far out that he could see this coming. Now, for Tocqueville, this despotism arises not because democracy is giving way to authoritarianism or giving way to monarchy, not at all. The despotism is particularly insidious because it comes out of democracy itself, Here's a way to think about it. Democracy is based on the idea of majority rule. But where does the majority get the right to rule? Let's just say we have a group of 10 people. Why should 6 people, just because they're 6, tell the other 4 what to do? Is it just because the 6 are more, they're stronger? So are we now submitting to a law in which might is right? Because the 6 are more and have greater, let's just say, muscle power, they get to wrestle the other 4 to the ground? No. The idea of democracy is based on the idea that the 6, even though the majority, need to have their power curtailed, limited. There have to be protections for the 4, which is minority rights. So the founders knew all this, and the founders worried about what they call tyranny of the majority. And here is where Tocqueville really takes off. He says the danger of democracy comes from the tyranny of the majority. Here's Tocqueville in his usual mode where he rises above the pedestrian and reaches the profound. He goes, unlimited power is in itself a bad and dangerous thing. He says, human beings are not competent to exercise it with discretion. God alone can be omnipotent. Why? Because his wisdom and his justice are always equal to his power. He goes, but for human beings, he goes, whenever you have all power concentrated in one, it's bad. He goes, it's bad when we call it a monarchy, when one person rules. He goes, it's bad when we call it an aristocracy, when a few people rule. But he goes, it is equally bad when we call it a democracy, when the majority rules or tyrannizes over the minority. The founders called it tyranny of the majority. Tocqueville remarkably calls it tyranny of the laws. Tyranny of the laws. And here's Tocqueville. He goes, what is the guarantee against the majority in the United States? He goes, public opinion forms the majority. The legislature represents and obeys the majority. So does the executive. The military is the majority under arms. The jury is the majority issuing decrees. So basically what Tocqueville is saying is that tyranny doesn't have to be the tyranny of one man. It can be the tyranny of the people. Or by the people here, he means the largest faction of the people, despotically ruling over a smaller faction. Now, what is the effect of this so-called soft despotism? I want to read Tocqueville here because it has to do with the majority doing this through the centralized state. Above this race of men stands an immense and tutelary power, which takes upon itself alone to secure the gratifications and to watch over the fate of the people. That power is absolute, minute, regular. It would be like the authority of a parent if, like that authority, its object was to prepare men for manhood. So it'd be one thing if this despotism was, listen, it's temporary, you're going to become an adult and you can then rule yourself. No, he goes, but it seeks on the contrary to keep people in perpetual childhood. For their happiness, such a government willingly labors, but it chooses to be the sole agent and the sole arbiter of that happiness. It provides for their security, foresees and supplies their necessities, facilitates their pleasures, manages their principal concerns, directs their industry, regulates the descent of property. what Tocqueville says is the government here is trying to do what? He goes, it's trying to spare us the care of thinking and the trouble of living. Now, he says the people gain a sort of independence from this soft despotism when? On election day. He goes, the people sort of take their power back for one day. So for one day every 2 years or 4 years, people get their power back. But he goes, they hold it just long enough to release it again. So he goes, by this system, the people shake off their state of dependence just long enough to select their master and then relapse into it again. So Tocqueville here is saying that by contrast with the participatory direct democracy of the New England town meeting, the centralized state does not consult the people. It rules over them, for them, if you will, but it rules despotically. And when Tocqueville uses the phrase soft despotism, by the way, soft here doesn't mean that the despotism is like marshmallow tyranny, not at all. What he means is it's despotism that is concealed. It's despotism that is traveling under the banner of freedom. So Tocqueville here is a champion of freedom. But what he's saying is that the greatest threat to freedom comes from democracy itself, comes from the tyranny of the majority, comes from the people, obviously not all the people, but some people, arrogating power to themselves and in the name of the people, tyrannizing over other people. So democracy here becomes a shibboleth, a justification for the arbitrary exercise of power. I think a prophetic warning very relevant to our own day.